Hi, I'm Eka Kapiotis, and I'm really thrilled to be here I'm here on behalf of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center, and we are continuing with our Women Gathering series, and I'm very excited to have Jennifer Goodnight with me tonight, or at least from a distance. So, Jennifer is a public health and occupational health professional and also works with the Medical Reserve Corps. And additionally, she is an infection prevention ambassador, and which I'm just want to hear more about because, there's so much discussion about what's going on with the vote and is it going to be safe? And I know people have a lot of concerns. And so, Jennifer, that's why I wanted to have you on and see I know you can enlighten us about this. So thank you, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to help and happy to answer questions.
Great. So you do a number of things that I've not ever heard of. The Medical Reserve Corps. What is that
Yes.
about?
So, outside of work, I do work as an occupational safety professional and a certified safety professional. But outside of work, I volunteer with Virginia's Medical Reserve Corps. And that's a part of the Virginia public health system. It's actually part of the national public health system, but it's run by the individual states. So Virginia's Medical Reserve Corps works with our Virginia public health departments to respond to crises or other times when public health professionals are needed. They've done mass vaccination pods, for example, in the past. They've also done education efforts and other staffing efforts. During COVID, they've been helping staff some nursing home facilities that were impacted, for example, train people on respirators, and just generally offer support whenever they can. So I've been helping the Medical Reserve Corps with the infection prevention efforts and with the public health education efforts after and during the pandemic. With regards to the election, we've been training infection prevention ambassadors. So, infection prevention ambassadors are public health personnel or volunteers who have been trained to help during the elections in order to minimize the potential for infection on election day.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a number of things that infection prevention ambassadors are trained to do, and I'd be happy to speak more about that.
Well, great, because I'm really curious about that. I love the name, for one thing. And of course, that was a really big concern. I know I was concerned about it. My husband is an election official, and so to have him, I know he's going to be spending a lot of time that day there, and I'm concerned about him being safe. So much less, and of course, people voting. And I know we have other options for voting, which we're going to be talking about as well. But yeah, if you could talk a little bit about what's going to happen on November 3rd.
Yeah. So I've been speaking with the Board of Elections and the Public Health Department a little bit and preparing for the election. We had in Virginia a primary election a couple of months ago in kind of the Winchester area where we did some practice runs of some of our policies. And we learned a lot from that primary since obviously there were fewer people there and we could trial run some of the practices. The goal of the Board of Elections is to promote the message that people can vote early and absentee, especially if they're worried about COVID. And they can vote in person if they prefer to. So it is your choice, but the Board of Elections is definitely suggesting that people vote absentee or in person early if possible. The day of, however, there are a number of things that infection prevention ambassadors will do for the actual election sites. We're hoping to have as many people as possible on the ground day of at each voting facility. But they will be opening doors to ensure there's outdoor ventilation, hopefully weather permitting. That will be easy to do. They'll be making sure that walking paths allow for the least intersection between people as possible, making sure that people are 6 feet spaced apart, putting up barriers between the election workers and the public so that you can hold your license up to the barrier to show your license, but not actually touch the barrier and not actually touch the person or hand your license over so that they don't have to touch you, you don't have to touch them. They will also have in-car voting as an option for some people if you don't want to get out of the car, either because of COVID risk, or if you're mobility impaired or you have small children with you, many of the sites will have the capability for you to call a number, say that you're there to vote, and somebody can come out to you with a mask, with gloves, and allow you to vote from your car. Not all sites will have this, but many will, as part of the COVID prevention effort. So there's a lot of ideas that we've been discussing. Of course, each site is different. Some of them are gyms, some of them are smaller areas, some of them have more ability to track and the footpath a little bit easier. There's different ventilation in different areas, and we're going to try and assess as much as possible before election day when we can.
Wow. Okay, so you'll be going into these locations and checking it all out and seeing how to create the proper flow and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're creating these, the Board of Elections, in combination with the Public Health Department, is creating these election boxes for the election officials, that they always have masks and disinfectants and wipes and gloves and all sorts of things, barriers. We've
When you
thought
say,
about maybe putting
when
some
you say,
floor spacing. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. When you say barriers, do you mean like the shields that they wear on the face or the drop down? Um, I know that when I went to the primary, they had like a big thing of plastic. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the
Yeah,
plexiglass barriers.
yeah.
But some people do like wearing face shields. Face shields, in addition to a mask, can be additionally protective if someone wants to add that.
Hmm.
And so they do sometimes put face shields into those kits. Of course, this is all going to be based on whether or not there's adequate supplies.
Right.
But in general, yeah, of course the phone always rings during a live event,
I
but
know.
in general, they're going to try and make sure everybody has adequate mask supplies and adequate gloves and wipes. One of the biggest concerns is making sure that there's adequate disinfectants, because we want to try and wipe down after every voter if possible. It's not always going to be
Okay.
possible, but it is ideal because we can't force anyone to wear masks and face coverings.
Right.
We can suggest it, and we plan to have people at the door requesting people to go back to their car and put on a mask if they don't have one, requesting that people put on a provided mask if they don't have one in their car, but we can't force people to wear them. And so it makes it all the more important that we clean often. And there's usually going to be an election official who's just designated to monitoring which stations are being used and then cleaning after that station after it's done.
So is there a need? Is this a volunteer opportunity, or people, or is this requiring training? I'm sorry, I'm not asking my question very well, but it sounds like you need a lot of people on the ground to be
Absolutely.
successful at this.
Yes,
So,
just for the May primaries, we trained 500 infection prevention ambassadors
wow.
just for May, and they're hoping to deploy thousands for November. So yes, I highly encourage people to volunteer for their local medical reserve corps. I got involved in it, as a volunteer effort, and have become increasingly involved over the years. But you can search Medical Reserve Corps Virginia, and you can find ways that you can help out. Not only do they need always people like pharmacists and nurses who can give vaccinations, and of course with COVID, a mass vaccination effort will hopefully be underway soon, but they
Mhm.
also need people who have experience with finances or administrative efforts, so that if we have a mass vaccination effort, we can understand, how do we organize the paperwork? How do we organize people in line? What should we do for site security? So any expertise can be very helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And so, are these volunteers? Do people volunteer for this, or is it a paid opportunity?
It is volunteer for the Medical Reserve Corps.
Okay.
The Department of Health and the Board of Elections all have employees that are paid that coordinate with us. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as the response that we've done to COVID, for filling in at nursing homes and distributing election infection prevention materials and training people, that's all on a voluntary basis.
Well, and that's great because I know a lot of people have said, gee, I want to be helpful. What can I do? How can I help? And I mean, this would be a really potent way to help support the election and the whole process of being safe.
Absolutely. We've had very highly increasing numbers of volunteers for the Medical Reserve Corps since the pandemic, which is fantastic. There's actually so many coming in that one of the things that I was helping doing was processing the new volunteers and understanding their skills so that we could place them in appropriate positions. So we hope to continue to get more, because the more people that we get, the more people we can train as infection prevention ambassadors. You don't need any specific training other than to attend a session and speak with the public health team and make sure you're comfortable and you've asked your questions. And then you have your point of contact day of that you can ask. But the election officers are also getting some infection prevention training. So it's meant to be a team effort. It's not all on the infection prevention ambassador. They're just there to think of questions that other people might not have thought of. For example, when I went there, I propped open the door, not only to allow for more ventilation, but also to reduce that as a touch surface so that not everybody was grabbing the same door handle all day long. I
Yeah.
also opened up a different exit so that people weren't crossing each other going to the entrance and the exit, so that there was a one-way walk and people could maintain more distance. So
Yeah.
just little things like that is going to be the main job of the IPA.
Cool. And so you had your phone, and I didn't put up my chimes because it hasn't been hasn't been windy, but it's starting up. So let me ask you a question, and I'm going to go put the chimes up so they don't interfere too much. Um, because okay, so that pretty much covers the day of, and I thought it was really wonderful that you were talking about that people can drive up, because women or anyone with a family, it's going to be hard. And of course, we're the Women's Resource Center, so we're always interested in how these things may impact women differently than, what are concerns that are specific to women. And of course,
Yes.
having family, and a lot of people don't only have kids, they might have elderly adults with them. They might be taking care of their parents or helping out other family members.
Exactly.
Can you say anything to that? And I'm going to go put the chimes up.
Sure. I mean, as you and I spoke about, sometimes women are often responsible for the health needs of the family and for the health risk assessments of the family. Of course, not always, but many women have thought about COVID and how to protect their families. And many of them are also responsible for childcare. And I know one of the hardest things during COVID is trying to help your children learn social distancing and understand social distancing. And especially during a pandemic and during an election, when you want to vote safely and you don't want your kids to either get infected or infect someone else, especially because some of the poll workers may be elderly, or some of the voters may be elderly, it can be hard to keep your kids in that social distancing space. And so that's partially why the in-car voting is such a good idea during the pandemic. I
Yeah,
believe they had that beforehand for people who were disabled or had kids that they just didn't want to get out of the car with, but it's even more important now because of the pandemic and voting. So I think making sure that women have resources to be able to make these decisions and know where to look so they can decide, do they think it's best for their family to vote by mail, to vote early in person, or to vote in person on November 3rd? That I want
mhm.
everybody to feel like they have those resources.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. And I think that what my husband had mentioned before, that it was always, the drive up was always open to elderly and disabled people, but now it's going to be open to really people that need to use it.
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. So, okay, now we're talking about the mail-in voting and also the in-person voting. And so, can you say a little bit about that? Because I know there's a lot of information out there about, mail-in voting and how soon you need to do it. And in Virginia, number one is, how do you get a mail-in ballot?
Yes. So if you want to request an absentee ballot, you can do so by going to the website that's scrolling down on the live feed here. And the last day to request that absentee ballot is October 23rd. The last day to register to vote is October 13th. That's also an important note to make. And make sure that you're registered in the proper location. At the primary, there were some people who had just moved to the area who had not registered soon enough for the Board of Elections to have their new information in their new location. So make sure you've got the proper location registered, and then 10 days later, October 23rd, is your deadline to request that absentee ballot. You can fill out a form online. I did that. I plan to vote absentee myself, and it took me about 5 minutes to register for that. So it's pretty
Okay,
easy.
great.
And those ballots will actually be mailed out starting this Friday. So I don't know when exactly everyone will receive theirs, but it's coming soon.
And then the idea is don't wait. Don't wait till the last minute because we want to get them in early. And so when the ballots are, and you might not know this, but when the ballots are sent in, they're held in a particular place until the day of the election.
As far as I know, honestly, I don't know very much about where they're held once they're received, but I agree with your statement that it's best to mail them in as soon as possible once you get them.
Yes, I would think the sooner the better, just to make sure. Yeah, wonderful.
And if you do want to vote early in person, those are slightly different deadlines. So you can vote early in person anytime before Halloween. Halloween is your last day to vote in person. And you can show up anytime during business hours, and there's going to be a couple of Saturdays as well. So there will be multiple days, and again, that starts this Friday, September 18th, continues through Saturday, October 31st, and the 2 Saturdays that you can vote are October 24th and October 31st. But of course, those might be more crowded, so you may want to go during the weekdays than when it's open.
And do you know, is that like 9 to 5 kind of hours, or how does one find out what the hours are?
There's an FAQ, so if you go to that elections.virginia.gov site, you can click vote early in person, or you can click the frequently asked questions, and you can find your location to go and when it's open. But in general, what the FAQ says is that it's going to be during business hours, except for those 2 weekend days. And you did ask me earlier, what if you ask for an absentee ballot and you change your mind and want to vote in person either early or on November 3rd? You can take your absentee ballot with you, but it needs to be unopened. If you've opened it and already started the process, there might be some problems with potentially voting twice. So you need to take it with you unopened and say, I registered to vote absentee, but I would now like to vote in person. And they will be able to guide you through that process.
Oh, great. Okay. And so you could take your absentee ballot and go to the Board of Elections. You could go to the elections office, which in our town, that's located in the government center on Commerce Avenue. So I know it's in different places, but in Warren County, for Warren County, that's where that would be. And so you could take it to, but it's got to be unopened. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So really important to remember not to open it and then take it in. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
So I'm going to actually even back up more because, there's some people who have not registered to vote. And can you just kind of walk us through the process really quickly? Where do you go to register to vote? How do you do it? And how long does it take?
Sure, that can often be done online as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as familiar with that process, but I know that if you change your license, for example, because you move to a new area, DMV will often ask you, would you like to register to vote in this area? But as far as how to register to vote in Virginia, you can do online voter registration. You can print out a form, mail it in if it wasn't done through DMV by changing your license.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple avenues to do it.
Okay, great. And that might be really also a simpler process for someone, say, that has kids or other, people that they're trying to take care of that they can't really, yeah.
And it can be hard to get either time off work or wait in the longer lines. We've discussed with the infection prevention ambassadors that there are going to be rushes, different times where people are more likely to vote early in the morning, late in the evening. It's going to be at lower periods at different times of the day because of people's work schedules, because of school schedules, etc. So that's important to keep in mind as you think of COVID and the risk of voting in person is what time would you be voting? And would you be voting at one of those peak times? We're still going to ask people to space out 6 feet apart while they're waiting, but there's only so much space in a facility. And if there's hundreds of people in line, some people could be waiting outside during November, which is not comfortable. So we want to make sure people are aware that you can vote from your car if you need to, or you can choose one of those off-peak times.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we've covered a little bit about how to register and the in-person and mail-in, but then there's the going to the, I think it's called the registrar's office. Is that
Do you mean to deliver your ballot or to vote early?
to vote early? Because now they've also changed that you don't have, number one, you don't need any excuse to change your ballot, to have your ballot to do mail-in, and you don't need any excuse to do do it in person.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that really opens the door to a lot of opportunity because it's open from tomorrow until October 31st. That's a really long window. That's like 5 weeks.
That's the goal. That gives people time to be able to come in, choose what time is right for them. Not everybody's going to be voting at once, but you are correct. It is your local general registrar's office. On the virginia.gov website, I know not everybody watching may be from Virginia, but on virginia.gov's website, on their FAQs, there is a direct link for how to find where your local registrar's office is so that you know where you can go for that early voting.
Right, great. Okay. And that seems to me like a really reasonable option if anyone's concerned that their mail-in ballot, that something you might not get there in time to be able to go in person and do it. And it really, I mean, unless there's a line when you arrive, it only should take a few minutes, right?
That would be my understanding, that the whole process is designed to be relatively quick, and therefore people shouldn't be waiting in line for long periods. Again, it may be that there are rushes that are unexpected, but one of the nice things about going and voting in person on one of those big windows is if it's too crowded, you can always come back another day, especially if you're on the earlier side.
Yeah.
So, if you walk in and decide there's just too many people for you to feel comfortable, you can leave. Kind of like at the grocery store. If it's especially crowded that day, you may not want to shop that day.
Right, right. And I thought too, considering what you're just talking about, that it is women that tend to make those kind of decisions for the family, for themselves, and a lot of women are also, as we said, taking care of elder people in addition to younger people. So there's a lot to consider. Yeah.
For sure.
Take a minute and look at we have some chat questions. Let's see. Oh, somebody put in some stuff. Hi, hello, hi everybody.
And it looks like we've got some information about where early voting is in Warren County, which is great.
Yeah.
And again, much of what I'm talking about is Virginia specific. Other states have medical reserve corps too. But I know Virginia's has been particularly active with training these infection prevention ambassadors, since this is primarily a state-run group, even though it's federally funded. So you would volunteer through your state, and your state would funnel you to your local group. So for us in Warren County, we're under the Lord Fairfax Medical Reserve Corps.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, we share with a couple other neighboring counties, but Fairfax and Loudoun County, for example, each have their own medical reserve corps because they have more people.
They do, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has really been fascinating. So, do you have any particular thing that you'd like to have people take home from this, or walk away from this discussion?
Well, I think it's very easy to not remember your mask, and therefore just try to remember when you drive up to vote, whether it be in person early or in person day of, to put on your mask, because it does protect other people. Many of the voter workers, as you mentioned, are going to be volunteering their time and sitting in a space for a long period of time, and they want to make sure that they're safe. So when you wear your mask, they feel safe. And if you're coughing or something like that, there are FAQs for what to do if there's an emergency and you can't vote. But please do not come actively sick to the site. You can stay in your car and call the number if you need to, but during the preview that we had in May, there was somebody who came in. We discussed it with the group afterwards, that had no mask and that was actively coughing, and we had to figure out what to do based on that. Now, luckily, nobody in our Medical Reserve Corps has gotten any infections from their volunteering, but we want to protect our volunteers too. So please think of others when you do go to vote, whatever way you choose to do so.
Yes, wonderful. I just saw a quote today about, about viewing these as responsibilities. I mean, we have rights, but we also have responsibilities. And it's, I'm just great. Let me just say, I am so grateful that you are on this call, and I'm grateful to know that Virginia is doing so much, and there are all these volunteers helping out to make sure that our votes are, we can vote safely and we can have our votes counted. And that just, it's really, really important. So I thank you very much for the work that you're doing to make sure that this is safe. And like I said, I have a vested interest, particularly because of my husband. I want to make sure he's safe. And anyway, so I think it's really important, and I know for myself, I do feel that I would like to go into the registrar's office. There's going to be plenty of time to do it. I've done that. I've walked in there before. They're very nice. They're happy to see you. This is their job, what we're doing. So I would encourage everyone to vote. And if you haven't registered yet, it's not too late. So please go out and register to vote. There's it's important. Okay, we have another one.
Is voting in the car only available on election day? Yes, as far as I know. Different sites are doing different car-based activities. There are some sites that we're discussing potentially only doing car voting. I don't know how far that's going to go. Again, a lot of this was being piloted in May, and some of those discussions may evolve as they get more estimates of how many voters, for example, and how many volunteers they have. But car voting, as far as I know, is only available in person, but you can call your local registrar's office to find out if you're disabled, for example, if they can help you vote and you don't have to come into the building.
Yeah. And, let me just point out, because I know that this is sometimes an issue for people, that family members might have a very strong opinion about who someone should vote for. But when you get back in that voting booth, you get to do what you want and you get to do what you feel is right. And so I kind of like the idea of if you can get in and do it on your own, if you have that kind of issue, which is not uncommon, it might be best to try to figure out when can you get, half an hour that you can go down and either vote early or make it so that you're not in, because I would imagine in the car, you probably don't have the kind of privacy that you have when you walk in behind.
Yes, the election officers take like an envelope that they will put in and they'll cover your ballot so that they're not reading it when they walk back in to fill it. But you are correct. You would have to take a clipboard from the election officer, fill it out, it'll show them your identification, fill it out, and then hand it back to them. And they do they do protect that secrecy, but it's not the same as you putting the ballot in yourself.
Yeah, okay. And the other important fact that you just mentioned again is that you need to have an ID. You need to have ID when you vote. So bring that with you.
Yes, I know that there's been different laws in different areas regarding identification. Of course, having identification is best. It's easiest, but again, there's that FAQ for how to vote if you either don't have your identification with you. We want to make sure that everybody who's registered to vote has the ability to vote. But if possible, bringing your identification is fastest.
Okay, great. Well, is there anything else you think that we need to cover before we sign off?
That's most of what I wanted to cover. Thank you all for your time. I hope everyone gets the chance to vote and stays safe between now and November and for the rest of the pandemic.
Yeah.
If you would like to volunteer for the Medical Reserve Corps, please do so. We need lots of people, not just during the pandemic, but just in the future too, because we do flu shot clinics and other responses like that. So we would welcome the help, and we welcome inquiries. And hopefully we will have an end to this pandemic soon and be in the process of learning from it rather than in the middle of it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Jennifer Goodnight, infection prevention ambassador and trainer. And I'm very happy that you were able to take this time. And let me just say, too, that this will go on YouTube. It is shareable. So if you know anyone that needs this kind of information, please feel free to pass it along. It will be there. So, and if you haven't registered, go do it. If you're make your plan now on how you're going to vote so that it becomes easy and manageable for you. And if you need help, reach out. Maybe you need help having a babysitter or having a friend watch your kids, or from a distance. Whatever you need to enable you to exercise that very important right. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you. And so I'd also like to thank Jen Avery, who's behind all of this. Hello, Jen. You going to peek out and say hi?
Hi.
Oh, there she is. Thank you for being our tech whiz here and getting this all working. Do join the Front Royal Women's Resource Center if you have an opportunity. We do really great things to support women and women's causes. It's a lot of fun. We can't wait till we can meet in person again, but until we do, we're just going to keep doing it this way. So thank you all so much. Take care, be safe, and see you next month.
Be safe, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.